Minister of Culture, Youth and Sport, Dr. Frank Anthony, and also on behalf of the Director of Culture, in whose office is largely responsible for this event. It is my privilege to begin the proceedings for the 2012 Edgar Mittelholzer Lecture Series. One of the tasks that I was asked to perform is to do an introduction to the Edgar Mittelholzer Lecture Series in order to provide necessary contexts, background, and information of this event that we are now about to witness. And I therefore, it is my honor, therefore, also to briefly focus the Edgar Mittelholzer Memorial Lecture Series. Now, what memories do we have of Edgar Austin Mittelholzer? If we go to his birthplace, his hometown, New Amsterdam, we'll find an empty lot on Coburg Street where the house where he lived once stood. We will also find about 2 miles away, a house in Tupper Park, where he also lived for a brief period, and a house in which relatives of his still reside. We find a 4-poster bed in a bedroom that he once occupied. Beyond those, there are no known physical memories that one can point to that exist in New Amsterdam as memories of the existence and the life there of Edgar Austin Mittelholzer. We have, therefore, very few physical memorials, very few museum pieces. We have, however, a valuable collection in the University of Guyana Library, where there are copies of a number of publications by Mittelholzer, and in fact, that collection is on exhibit just behind there, and you may take a look at it before you leave this evening. There is that small collection of Edgar Mittelholzer's work. It might be a small collection, but it is extremely valuable because it contains many of the first productions, copies of the original first productions of many of his publications, and 1 or 2 very rare items that I cannot say where you will find elsewhere. Just to give a brief example, there is a novella called The Adding Machine, which he published in Jamaica very early in his career, and which has not surfaced many other places since then. So that the library collection has a few archival documents of the work of Edgar Mittelholzer. If you go to New Amsterdam for replicas of Mittelholzer, the town will give you very little. But if you go to Edgar Mittelholzer for information, replicas of New Amsterdam, he will give us a treasure. He has given the nation more than we can measure. A literature, preserved documentation of communities such as New Amsterdam, communities such as Georgetown in the 1930s and 40s. And therefore, to honor Edgar Mittelholzer is to enlarge the heritage that he has left in our literature, in the literature of Guyana and the Caribbean, and in the literary and cultural heritage of the region. The Edgar Mittelholzer Lecture Series is therefore a very important monument, if I may call it that, of the life and work of Mittelholzer. It began in 1967, and the first Edgar Mittelholzer lecture was delivered by A.J. Seymour. And the director of culture at the time, Lynette Dolphin, made a few remarks about that first presentation by Seymour and about the lecture series. And she said, "I treasure my personal memories of the discipline and persistence of Mittelholzer as a pioneer, and particularly I recall a conversation with Edgar here in Georgetown in the 1950s, when he expressed his faith in the literary evolution of the Caribbean and urged me to continue my own writing career. That also urged her to be a part of the beginning of the Edgar Mittelholzer lecture series, and so it began. The lecture series since then covered a range of subjects over the decades, and a few very important and memorable contributions to the lecture series. For example, after A.J. Seymour in 1967, when he presented Edgar Mittelholzer, The Man and His Work, there is the work of Dennis Williams, who spoke in 1969 about Guyanese culture and art. Wilson Harris in 1970, who presented History, Fable and Myth in Guyana and in History, Fable and Myth in the Caribbean and the Guyanas. And Martin Carter, who produced Man and Making, Victim and Vehicle. Now, though the last two are extremely important literary documents, and they have remained as some of the outstanding literary and critical works of the Caribbean. Over the decades of the Edgar Mittelholzer lecture series, it became sporadic, and over the number of years since it began, there has definitely not been an annual presentation of the lecture series. It became sporadic, as I have said, and after a number of years of its absence, it was revised in 2009 by the present Director of Culture. And we recall V.S. Naipaul, who told us that we need our writers to tell us who we are, and to ensure that the knowledge of this important sector of Guyanese literary heritage is sustained. The lecture series was resuscitated. And it is not only about Edgar Mittelholzer, but about Guyana, about its art, its culture, its writing, and its ideas. So the Edgar Mittelholzer lecture series is about all of that: art, culture, writing, ideas. And I feel therefore quite honored to invite the Minister of Culture, Youth and Sport, the Honorable Dr. Frank Anthony, to give us his introductory remarks for the 2012 Edgar Mittelholzer lecture series.
Honorable Prime Minister Samuel Hines, performing the duties of President, Minister Robson Ben, our distinguished guests who will be giving us the lecture tonight, Pauline Melville, other distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I feel extremely honored to be here tonight with so many distinguished people in the audience, and I'm sure you didn't come to listen to me, but you came to listen to the presentation that we're about to hear about remembering, but also using Edgar's work to broaden our discussion on creative writing, literature, and culture in our country. As you've heard from Al, it started in 1967 by A.J. Seymour, 2 years after Edgar Mittelholzer's death. And since then, I think the lectures that were presented over the years are in fact fine works in themselves and really has advanced our culture and sometimes extended it to the rest of the Caribbean and the rest of the world. And I think so, over the years, these lectures have in some way become lost to us as a people. And while I know there's a collection at the University of Guyana, if you ask the average Guyanese or try to go to the bookstore to get these lectures, they're not readily available. And so one of the things that we've been working on in the ministry with Mr. Andrew Linsdale is to collect all of these lectures and put them in one book and to publish them so that it becomes more accessible. And I know Mr. Alim Hussein has been also given the task of helping with the editing and so forth. So I expect that by next year, we should be able to have all the lectures that we've had so far since 1967 put together, and by next year we should launch that publication and make it more accessible to people here and to people abroad.